Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Freer Gallery of Art in the National Museum of Asian Art. I'm Masumeh Farhad. I am the Ebrahimi Family Curator for Persian, Arab, and Turkish art, and the Senior Associate Director for Research. I'm delighted to have you all here for the 15th Freer Medal Lecture and Ceremony in honor of Gülru Necipoğlu. Before we start the ceremony and the lecture, I would like to mention some housekeeping notes. Would you please silence your phones? And if you like to take photographs, you may do so, but without a flash. And also, please don't video the lecture or the ceremony. We will have it on our channel, on our digital channel, as soon as possible. And we would be very grateful if you adhere to these house rules. And on that note, it is my pleasure to welcome Chase Robinson, the Dame Julian Sackler Director of the Freer Gallery of Art and the Arthur M. Sackler Gallery, the National Museum of Asian Arts. Chase.
Thank you, Masumeh. Welcome. Indeed, it is a distinct pleasure for me to welcome you this evening for the award of the Freer Medal for exemplary contributions to the field of Asian art and scholarship. Named for our museum founder, Charles Lang Freer, the medal honors persons who, over the course of their career, have contributed in a significant and transformative way to the understanding of the arts of Asia. Above all, today's ceremony is a celebration of creativity and intellectual impact. In 1923, the Freer Gallery of Art opened, America's first national art museum. For a century, the National Museum of Asian Art has achieved a reputation for excellence through its research, conservation, publications, exhibitions, and scholarly exchanges. This is a particularly special moment for the museum. This is our centennial year. And next spring, we'll launch the Freer Research Center, devoted to strengthening our commitment to innovative research, supporting emerging scholars, initiating global convenings, and launching new publication series. This evening, we honor the career of Gülru Necipoğlu, the Aga Khan Professor of Islamic Art and Director of the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture at Harvard University. Dr. Necipoğlu's groundbreaking research spans millennia of the art, the history, and the geography of the Islamic world. Her inquiries into pre-modern architectural practices, the role of cosmopolitanism, the aesthetics of ornament, and the role of optics have transformed our understanding of the arts and architecture of the Islamic world. Throughout her career, Dr. Necipoğlu has explored different facets of the complex artistic and cultural relationships of the Ottoman, Safavid, Mughal Empires and their interactions with Europe and China, countering in many cases long-held Orientalist assumptions and reconfiguring our perception of the region and its architectural heritage. Over the years, she's taught and inspired generations of students who are continuing her remarkable legacy, both nationally and internationally. Born in Istanbul, Dr. Necipoğlu received her bachelor's degree in art history from Wesleyan University with a concentration on late medieval and Renaissance art. In 1986, she completed her master's and PhD degrees at Harvard, focusing on the architecture of the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires. Dr. Necipoğlu already established her reputation in the field of Ottoman studies with a seminar paper on the Süleymaniye complex, which was published already in 1985. She developed a synchronic approach to the art and architecture of the Ottoman Empire by taking advantage of the largely neglected archival materials. Textual archaeology also formed the foundation of her award-winning doctoral thesis, The Formation of an Ottoman Imperial Tradition, the Topkapi Palace of the 15th and 16th centuries, which served as the foundation for her first book, Architecture, Ceremonial, and Power, the Topkapi Palace in the 15th and 16th centuries. It would be the first of many. Dr. Necipoğlu launched her academic career at Columbia, and in the following year, she joined Harvard's Department of Fine Arts. 6 years later, she was appointed the Aga Khan Professor of Islamic Art and Director of the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Art. As she recalls, as a student, there were no tenured female professors in the department. But when she joined, she and several other new colleagues helped pave the way toward more diverse representation. Dr. Necipoğlu's passion to teach, to mentor, and to inspire students has remained a cornerstone of her career. She has supervised almost 30 PhD students and is currently overseeing many others. According to one of her students, she is, quote, a scholar whose character is as winning as her contribution to the field, which combines intellectual prowess and personal approachability. Beyond her own scholarship, Dr. Necipoğlu has had an untold impact in advancing the field in Islamic art as editor of the journal Muqarnas, an annual of the visual cultures of the Islamic world, which she took on in 1993. While teaching and serving as director of the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Art and as editor of Muqarnas, Dr. Necipoğlu has continued her pioneering research and publications. Her award-winning publication, The Topkapi Scroll, Geometry and Ornament in Islamic Architecture, was characterized by one reviewer as a work of imagination and erudition, and one of the most important contributions to the understanding of Islamic art. Her sustained interest in the religious and civic architecture of the Ottoman master architect Sinan laid the foundation for another magisterial publication, The Age of Sinan, Architectural Culture in the Ottoman Empire, which was published in 2005. In addition to her monographic studies, she's written over 45 articles and edited 8 scholarly volumes. One such edited work is A Companion to Islamic Art and Architecture. She also collaborated on Treasures of Knowledge, an inventory of the Ottoman Palace Library, which has been lauded as a groundbreaking study that will remain with us for many decades. In recognition of her many academic contributions, Dr. Necipoğlu has received numerous awards, including a 2021 Lifelong Achievement Award from the Turkish Professional Architects Association. She's an elected member of the British Academy, the American Philosophical Society, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, to mention only a few. She's also served as Slade Professor of Fine Art at the University of Cambridge. Dr. Necipoğlu's boundless curiosity, brilliant vision, and intellectual rigor have enabled her to transform the study of the arts and architecture of the Islamic world, and with it, the scholarly and public understanding of its nuances, its complexities, and its interactions with and contributions to other traditions. Please join me in celebrating Dr. Gülru Necipoğlu.
I'm greatly honored and humbled by being awarded the legendary Freer Medal. And it is an immense pleasure to deliver my lecture this evening to such a distinguished audience on this memorable occasion. This lecture reframes within a broad transcultural framework one of the famous Topkapı Palace Museum albums in Istanbul. I have selected to focus on this album because its Pan-Asian perspective resonates with the collection of the Freer Gallery of Art. Analyzing this album will also allow me to closely engage with the equally famous Freer Divan of Sultan Ahmet Celayir. The Topkapı album's inventory number is H2153. Because it was in the Hazine, that's why it's H, meaning treasury collection of the Ottoman Imperial Palace. This album uniquely juxtaposes calligraphic samples with images in the Persianate, Cathayan, or Chinese, and Frankish, named European manners. My lecture particularly highlights the album's European and Europeanizing images, which have received very little attention. They are labeled by inscriptions as Kâr-ı Ferenk, that is, work in the Frankish manner, and the album's more numerous Chinese or Sinicizing in the Chinese manner works are identified by inscriptions as Kâr-ı Hatay, and we will see examples of those as well. With a few exceptions, the very large bifolios of the Topkapı album were separated from each other in the 20th century for preservation purposes. But they were each carefully numbered to indicate their original order in the dismantled album. Based on those page numbers, I have reconstructed the bifolios featured in my lecture, like the one seen on the screen. This album also contains some of the world's earliest surviving examples of Italian Renaissance engravings from Florence and Ferrara that had been fully published, including those seen on the screen. I shall end my lecture with the late 15th century engravings that are believed to be collected in the court of the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II in Istanbul. I will also propose that the album H2153 approximated its present form in the court scriptorium of Mehmed's grandson, Sultan Selim I, shortly after 1514, when he briefly occupied Tabriz in Safavid, Iran. Some of the album's artworks were probably acquired in Tabriz. To those works, others previously collected at the Topkapı Palace Treasury were added. I believe that local Ottoman artists must have collaborated in preparing this album's bifolios with their Tabrizi colleagues imported by Sultan Selim to his own court scriptorium. The Europeanizing images by Persianate artists in the album are mostly pen and ink drawings from the 14th and early 15th centuries. This technique, known as black pen or siyah kalem or kalem siyahi, emerged in the early 14th century mural paintings and manuscripts of the Mongol Ilkhanid dynasty. The technique became further refined under the subsequent Mongol dynasty of the Celayirids, whose twin capitals were Tabriz and Baghdad. The painting on the screen from the mid-16th century, from a mid-16th century album compiled in Safavid, Iran, depicts such a mural. The painting is attributed by its upper inscription to the famous Celayirid court painter Khwaja Abd al-Hay, who excelled particularly in the black pen technique. He became the leading Celayirid court painter during the reign of Sultan Ahmed Celayir. This painter was then carried off by Timur, or Tamerlane, to Samarkand and transmitted Celayirid practices in the Timurid court. The images on the screen feature inscriptions that identify them as Frankish work, Kâr-ı Fereng, and as Cathayan pen work, Kalem-i Hatay. So here you see they are interestingly upside down in relationship to the orientation of the album, which suggests that they were inscribed before the album was created. So most likely they were in folders and quickly identified and then mounted on the album. Both stylistic categories appear in Timurid texts, including a passage by Ali Shirnavai, dated 1501. This text states that the skilled manuscript painter must master the Cathayan, Hatayi, and Frankish, Ferengi manners. So this was a kind of requirement that the poet recommends. Those two foreign styles were considered commensurate with one another because of a shared emphasis on naturalism. I think this explains why elements from both traditions were often woven together in several hybrid works that we shall see this evening from the Topkapı Palace album. Let us now focus on this image which I titled 8 Figures in European Attire. It is on a horizontal band of aged brownish paper, a format that was common in the Mongol context. On the screen, you also see the page that features this image. So here it is. It portrays 8 standing personages distinguished by their Frankish physiognomy, hairstyle, and attire. This black ink drawing is subtly highlighted with touches of colored washes. The awkward rendering of the necks and shoulders, however, suggests that it is not the original work of a Frank, but rather a work in the Frankish manner by a Persianate painter. The costumes and archaic crusader-type armaments suggest a 14th century date before the emergence of more closely fitted and short-length male attire in early Renaissance Europe. Based on stylistic grounds, this drawing was plausibly attributed by Bernard O'Kane to the Celayirid courts in Tabriz or Baghdad around the 3rd quarter of the 14th century. He regards the cross-hatching on some of the robes, here and here, as a diagnostic feature of the Celayirid style. O'Kane's proposed date is supported by my reconstruction of the bifolio that features 8 figures. It has a U-shaped symmetrical layout on both pages, each organized around a central painting from a Celayirid, famous Celayirid Shahnameh, datable to around 1370. So here they face each other, and on the margins are smaller images and calligraphies. The contiguous Frankish image and Shahnameh painting may likely be coeval because they are both framed by nearly identical gilded rulings that were clearly made before they were pasted on the album. I discovered a rather consistent visual logic governing the compositional schemes of many pages in this album, which was thought to be arbitrarily assembled. Its symmetrical bifolios often feature centerpieces around which smaller items were arranged in the margins. The images assembled in such layouts were often evoking suggestive visual parallels, at least to their compilers, but sometimes to us as well, that were formerly overlooked. Another drawing from the Topkapı album, which I have labeled Celestial Vision, has also been attributed to late 14th century Jalayirid courts in Tabriz or Baghdad. I interpret this mysterious work as the product of a hybridization of Europeanizing and Sinicizing imagery. It is finished on black ink. It is a finished black ink drawing with gray and blue wash framed by gilded rulings. On the right side is a huge dragon and a bent tree. The dragon is trying to reach this mysterious, huge celestial roundel enveloped by Chinese cloud bands and fiery swirls. This seems to be a supernatural, flaming, or luminous pearl of perfection, which is a Chinese metaphor of spiritual enlightenment. The upper left side depicts a Christian scene of enlightenment. It shows the miraculous appearance to two men on a mountain of a fiery six-winged angel. The imaginative artist has translated a presumably Frankish model, like those seen on the screen, into the Cathayan mode of landscape painting. The drawing is therefore a cosmic site of encounter where Europe meets China. These three Europeanizing drawings from the Dietz albums in Berlin, which were compiled in the 18th century from materials again removed from albums at the Topkapı Palace, I published them recently in an article. The first drawing on the upper left corner depicts an equestrian Frankish king accompanied by two men playing medieval music instruments. It is seemingly based on a late medieval European source, but its details betray the hand of a Persian artist, probably Timurid. The next two drawings represent riding aristocratic Frankish couples. On the left is a delicate line drawing against an empty background. It represents a couple on horseback accompanied by an attendant riding behind them. The woman wears a robe with hanging sleeves, and her neck is covered by a wimple. Wimples were these shawl-like structures covering the neck under a wide-brimmed hat. The courting man with a Frankish hairdo affectionately wraps his arm around the lady's shoulder. The attendant wearing a peaked hat is garbed in a short robe. The horses with long manes and back straps have harnesses tied in the Mongolian fashion, so this kind of fashion. The third drawing of a riding couple with a dog is more elaborately modulated in gray wash. Instead of a blank background, it features the added backdrop of a Sinicizing landscape. This more ambitious finished artwork combines European and Chinese elements in hybrid fashion. Here we see a detail. It represents a courting couple on horseback with the man placing his arm around the woman's shoulder. A domesticated dog with a collar runs behind them. The woman fashionably holds a somewhat deformed lapdog with her rather clumsily rendered hand. She wears a robe with pleated hanging sleeves and a peaked hat over the wimple that covers her neck. Such tiny lapdogs became a status symbol in the later Middle Ages, particularly among French nobility. The lady is being offered a round fruit or pomegranate by her devotee, commonly signifying fertility. Besides the Chinese landscape, another element of hybridity in this Europeanizing drawing is the man's exotic costume with a Chinese cloud color. His Mongol hairdo is tied with ribbons on both sides in a bun. I have also suggested in the recent article that French Gothic ivory mirror cases from the first half of the 14th century provide a close parallel to the Dietz album's courting couples with attendants. Particularly noteworthy are the similar peaked headdresses with wimples and the robes with hanging sleeves worn by the noble ladies who are admiringly embraced by their chivalric male companions. Such mass-produced portable ivory objects could easily have reached Tabriz or Baghdad under the Mongol Jelalids, or even earlier under the Mongol Ilkhanids. The ink drawing on the right is from our Topkapı album. It resembles the Dietz album's two drawings of riding Frankish couples. However, this is the astonishing representation of a triumphal procession in black ink and gray. It is the fragment of a longer image in horizontal format on an aged brownish paper. In the foreground, it depicts a convoy of horses tied from the neck to parallel roads that were likely attached to a ceremonial cart on wheels. The central horse rider is crowned by a laurel wreath in the manner of ancient Roman triumphs. But compared to the Dietz album's early 15th century riding couples on newer off-white paper, this one is damaged and more delicately modeled. I ascribe it to the Jalayirid courts, probably from the 1390s to circa 1400. The triumphal procession drawing comes close to the 14th century allegorical Petrarchan concept of triumph of virtues. The late medieval Frankish costumes worn by the male and female spectators on horseback resemble those in the Dietz album drawings. The aristocratic riders in the background include two women, and they are wearing these peaked hats with wimples and hanging sleeves, and this woman is once again holding a dog with a similarly depicted hand. The young man with a Frankish hairdo at the far left amorously offers her a round fruit. The other man, shown in profile at the right, is holding horse reins and wears a hood over his head. His fashionable cape, lined with ermine fur, resembles that of the man holding the fruit. So this ermine fur will appear in later Jalayirid images I will show. So here, so you can see it's a kind of stripes like fur, and also here. These probably Jalayirid images also depict aristocratic couples with the man offering a round fruit to his companion. Note the similar long-sleeved robes of the women lined with ermine fur. The Frankish iconography of courtly love, companionship, and chivalry therefore must have been particularly appealing in the Jalayirid context. The Jalayirid and attribution I have suggested for triumphal procession seems supported by the pen and ink marginal compositions of Sultan Ahmet Celalir's famous Divan in the Freer Gallery of Art. Its bifolio seen on the screen combines a Chinese landscape with an awareness of Western European visual models. The Divan's exquisite Celalit black pen compositions feature some washes in gray, blue, brown, and gold. As my esteemed colleague Masume Farhat has shown in her recent article on this Divan, its ink compositions exemplify an unparalleled Celalit taste for lyrical naturalism. I'm enthusiastically waiting for her monograph on this wonderful manuscript. The Divan's early Nastaliq calligraphy has also been studied by another renowned Freer Gallery colleague, Dr. Simon Rettig, and it's a great pleasure that both of them are in this evening's audience. The Freer Divan has a seal impression of the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II, which indicates that it reached the Ottoman court before Bayezid's son and successor Selim I briefly seized Safavid Tabriz in 1514. So it was in the palace library, most books of which have seals of Bayezid II. Therefore, like our album H2153, the Freer Divan once belonged to the Royal Library collection of the Topkapı Palace. What makes the ink drawings of the Divan relevant for the less accomplished triumphal procession drawing in the album is their individualized personages. Both drawings depict individuals with comparable big round eyeballs, puckered lips, and pointed noses. Their naturalistic gestures, the rendering of animals and costumes are also similar. Note, for example, the woman's wimple at the upper left corner and the man's peaked hat below. The Freer Divan captures the cosmopolitan flavor of Celalit fashions, resonating with those of late medieval Frankish courts in the Latin West and the Levant. From the same ink drawing in the Freer Divan, I'm showing a standing couple next to a tent with the woman wearing a similar wimpled headdress. And here, another woman in front of a tent with hanging sleeves and ermine-lined, fur-lined robe. Also note that the cross-hatching of the tent's bands echo those of the horses' saddle straps. As mentioned earlier, cross-hatching has been posited as a diagnostic feature of Celalit's style. Another clue supporting an attribution of the triumphal procession drawing to the Celalit context is a landscape painting, in a very little known landscape painting in the Topkapı album. It is identified by an inscription as the work of Ahmed Musa. This legendary painter flourished in the Ilkhanid court in 14th century Tabriz. He is described in Safavid sources as the inventor of the naturalistic Persian painting at the Ilkhanid court. I'm just quoting this album description, quote, "Another form of picture making by water and pigment existed in the Cathayan realm and in the Frankish realm until Ustad Ahmed Musa lifted the veil from the face of depiction, and the depiction that is now current was invented by him." End quote. Remarkably, this colored landscape painting attributed to Ahmed Musa in our album is adjacent to a Celalit ink drawing. That drawing again resembles personages depicted in triumphal procession. Here is what the full page looks like and a detail of that ink drawing. On the upper left corner of the landscape is the inscription that reads, "Work of Ahmed Musa." Probably the black ink drawing was pasted next to the landscape painting because both were considered related works associated with the Jalayirid context. It is believed also by some that the Ilkhanid artist Ahmed Musa may have continued to work after the Ilkhanids under the Jalayirids who succeeded them. Now I'm showing a comparison to the freer Divan of Sultan Ahmed Celayir. Both drawings show two pairs of amorous couples who are depicted in outdoor settings. Once again, the individuals wear robes with hanging sleeves and are luxuriously lined with ermine fur. Their hairstyles are also similar. Moreover, the round tables in both images each depict two wine bottles. My analysis of the hybrid images in the album H2153 thus opens new perspectives on the Jalayirid pictorial tradition. The ink and wash drawings of this Topkapı album document the copying and creative transformation of Frankish as well as Cathayan models in the Jalayirid court. These two foreign models were sometimes successfully integrated into the mature Jalayirid pictorial idiom, which is exemplified by the freer Divan. So in the Topkapı album, attributions to named artists and their styles are sometimes accompanied by appraisals in Persian. So for example, this one says, this is the work of Musa, Ahmed Musa, made extremely well. And here, work of master Ahmed Musa, very good. So they were already connoisseurs, like today's museums. This does testify to a pre-modern tradition of connoisseurship informed by the workshop lore of artists familiar with the works mounted in the album. Let us now turn to these three Europeanizing images from our Topkapı album to H2153. They are all in brown ink rather than black ink drawings. They stand apart with their unusual subjects, seemingly inspired by Latin Christian biblical imagery. The worn-out state of these drawings on brownish paper differentiates them from newer-looking works on off-white paper. Once again, a Jalayirid provenance seems likely to me. So I will show them individually now with close-up images. The first Europeanizing example is a seated angel, both delineated and colored in brown, gray, blue, red, orange, and gold. It is drawn on a considerably damaged piece of brownish paper. This enigmatic work represents a seated figure with Frankish physiognomy and hairdo. She is wearing a lavishly draped costume and holding with both hands, from below and above, a roundel that emanates light. It seems to be inspired by the image of a seated angel holding an orb, like the mid-14th century panel painting here I show by Guariento di Arpo. And this kind of style from this period is known as the so-called International Gothic style. So the halo has been, as you can see here, it was a halo. The halo has been transformed into an exotic hairdo encircling the seated angel's French braid. I call it French braid. Resembling mountains, These are like the wings, and close-up shows that they are faintly painted with feathers. Also, the hairdo is decorated with a rosette-shaped lobed pendant, which is often found in portraits of Chinese ladies in the same album. So once again, you find a combination of Chinese and Europeanizing elements, and it is tied to a ribbon that flutters in the back. Seated on a semi-perspectively rendered throne, the Frankish angel rests one foot on a stool. This foot sports a string-tied sandal with a Chinese knot. And this kind of Chinese knot is also noted. Sandal is depicted in a painting that is in our album, which is a procession with individuals carrying Chinese ceramics. The procession painting is generally attributed to late 15th century, the Akkoyunlu Turkmen court in Tabriz. The second Europeanizing drawing, which I labeled King Getting Undressed in front of a reclining female nude, is drawn in brown ink with touches of black and gray and pinkish brown wash. The crisp drapery folds and stiff nude bodies resonate with imagery from the Latin West. Differing from the woman's Frankish physiognomy, the man has a typically Persianate facial feature. His pointed oriental helmet crown with two long feathers suggests that this hybrid drawing was probably inspired by stories of ancient kings and prophets. Perhaps David lays with Bathsheba. Although some nude women in literary narratives are occasionally depicted in Persianate painting, male nudes were entirely unprecedented. Reconstructing the two sides of this bifolio, the front and then the back, indicates that our painting is completely dominated by Chinese imagery. Particularly this Ming period scroll of Chinese ladies playing music, eating, and enjoying themselves in the garden, but also parts and fragments of the same scroll are distributed throughout the album in different pages. Then we turn to the biblical subject of the third ink drawing, which was identified by Julian Raby as Samson rending the lion. It is rendered in brown ink with pinkish brown wash and touches of red and gray. This study sheet with two nearly identical lion riders who are rending the jaws of their respective mounts exemplifies the workshop practice of copying. So this seems to be the master's drawing, and this is the copy. Parts of the image are lost. Such study exercises were known as mashq, were common among calligraphers and painter decorators of Persianate court workshops. I will now give you quickly some examples of copies in our album, 2153. So here you have 4 and even more copies of the same painting of two seated Chinese women, and here two standing Chinese officers with very close copies. Sometimes in the album they are identified as mashq of so-and-so. And another example of copying Chinese models is here, and the one in the right is attributed by an inscription to Sheikhi. the artist Şeyhi, who was active in the Akkoyunlu Turkmen court in Tabriz during the reign of Sultan Yakup, who ruled between 1478 and 1490. Let us compare King getting undressed and Samson rending the lion. You can clearly see that the rendering is very similar, and both of them are wearing pointed helmets with two very tall feathers. Moreover, this drawing of Samson is once again mounted on a folio with three different styles. This coming from the Ming scroll that we saw previously, Jalairid landscape painting with angels, and the Samson drawing itself. A remarkable painted analog to the Europeanizing Samson rending the lion drawing has been noted by Julian Raby in the same album. This rider seen on the upper right corner is part of a study sheet belonging to the enigmatic group of images in the Topkapı album attributed by inscriptions to Muhammed Siyah Kalem, or Muhammad the Black Pen. Interestingly then, at least in this example, we find a link of the Siyah Kalem artist with Europeanizing imagery. And here you see a print of such an image. But also, I would like to point out a previously unnoted, even closer parallel to the fluttering cape in this probably Ming copy of a drawing in the same album. So all kinds of cross-references, therefore, happen to both European and Chinese imagery. Here I'm comparing these two pages, which have a tripartite layout, each with three different styles juxtaposed. And now I turn to my concluding section. The tantalizing hybridity of some images in the Topkapı album H2153 reveals that the practice of copying admired prototypes was complemented by a previously underestimated transcultural dimension. This album points to the blending of Persianate, Cathayan, and Frankish manners. Images in all three styles are juxtaposed in many paintings, and also here we see that the seamless internalization of the Frankish and Cathayan modes of depiction are exemplified in this bifolio, which was not known to be a bifolio, but very famous individual paintings in themselves. They are both attributed to late 15th century Akkoyunlu court in Tabriz. So one is a synicizing procession of Chinese porcelain that we have already seen, and the other a Christian monastery with Frankish details. The previously unknown mounting of these two celebrated images on the same bifolio is a fascinating revelation. It speaks to the selective integration of elements from both the Cathayan and Frankish manners into the Persianate painting tradition, which was, in this case, Akkoyunlu examples heralded by former Jalairid images. I will conclude with the latest Europeanizing images in our album. These portraits, which are attributed to court painters of the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II. These late 15th century portraits are study exercises that now respond to Italian Renaissance models instead of medieval international Gothic imagery. They are polychrome paintings. I mean, they are not finished paintings, but actually studies. They are all polychrome paintings, unlike the earlier Europeanizing ink and wash drawings. Rather than depict exotic Frankish foreigners and narrative subjects, these Ottoman paintings embrace the latest Western techniques of naturalistic depiction for self-representation. The mostly bust format of these portraits was unprecedented in the Perso-Islamic painting tradition, where individuals are shown in full body form, whether seated, riding, or enthroned. The same album also includes these fascinating bust and half-length portraits of a Chinese man and woman, probably dating from the Ming period. These Chinese portraits are rendered in a flat, linear style, unlike the same album's Ottoman portraits, which emulate European models with three-dimensional modeling and shading. Interestingly, our album only contains one Chinese woodblock print, which also displays a starkly linear style. This didactic print depicts the 24 acts of filial piety, namely the duties of sons towards their fathers and elderly parents, accompanied by explanatory texts. By contrast, the Topkapı album gives prominence to 15 Italian Renaissance engravings collected at the court of Mehmed II, and 10 of them feature secular subjects, including nudes as well as winemaking. These symmetrically composed bifolios, which I have reconstructed, display some of the rare Florentine and Ferrarese engravings, which are accompanied, curiously, by roughly contemporaneous 15th century Persian calligraphies. The calligraphies are mostly signed by two famous brothers, Abd al-Karim al-Yaqubi and Abd al-Rahim al-Yaqubi, who practiced at the Akkoyunlu ruler Sultan Yaqub's court, at least in their later career. Such bifolios stress the comparable aesthetic value assigned to figurative and calligraphic works in the black line technique. These bifolios and the whole album seem to have been compiled in the court of the Ottoman Sultan Selim I, as I first mentioned, shortly after he occupied Safavid Tabriz in 1514. Sultan Selim not only transferred many painters and calligraphers from Tabriz to his court, but also admired Italian Renaissance art like his grandfather Mehmed II. That explains Selim's interest in preserving the multicultural works compiled in the Topkapı album H2153 and its much smaller companion. This companion, 2160, is pre-imprinted with Selim's seal, his oval seal, both in its first and last pages. So that oval seal was only imprinted during his reign, unlike the Sultan's round treasury seal, which was used by all later rulers. Now, some scraps of cropped large paintings mounted in H2153 are pasted in the remaining parts of this, in the pages which I have shown. Basically, what we see is the large paintings are mounted in our album, but they had to be cut to fit the pages, and then the scraps have been preserved here, as well as the study drawings for them. In general, this album is not only smaller, but also the paintings in them are minuscule. Usually they are even listed as minuscule work, kâr-ı hurdek. And what also becomes clear is this is a primarily calligraphy-oriented album. It is dominated by calligraphy. And to conclude, I'm returning to this bifolio that we saw earlier. On it, Mehmed II's Florentine print, inscribed El Gran Turco, is coupled with Mehmed's Europeanizing portrait that has been attributed to his court painter Sinan Bey. This Ottoman artist was trained in Italianate painting by a foreign master. The Sultan's two centrally placed profile portraits gaze at each other, surrounded by subordinate items in U-shaped formats. This composition invites comparison between the European and Europeanizing manners of image making promoted in the Ottoman court. The Persian poems pasted next to each portrait praise the beauty of the beloved's face, no doubt referring to Mehmed II's adjacent portraits. To conclude, the Topkapı album H2153 visually prefigures the cross-cultural comparison between Persianate, Frankish, and Cathayan artistic traditions codified later in the 16th century in Safavid album prefaces. This Topkapı album also foreshadows the subsequent replacement of China with Europe as the primary source of foreign inspiration for Persianate pictorial arts in early modern Islamic courts. Thank you.